Previously on Project 250R.
I'm going to Bonehead Performance to pick up the 250R parts.
Here are the parts. Got them all laying out for you guys. This turned out better than what I expected. This is the way I wanted it to turn out. And let's start throwing this thing together, man. Alright guys, so my mission for this video is going to be to install these parts right here. So I don't have the tires in the mix. I don't think we're going to get to that in this video. We still have to assemble our brake calipers and whatnot, and that's going to have to be done before we can get those front tires on. So for now, I think this is a pretty tall task to put in one video. We've got all our stuff laid out here. We got that Fireball Racing anti-fade lock nut, got our carrier, Graydon Proline bumper, the Duncan Racing front bumper, Roll Design A-arms, we got our Roll Design tie rods, new tie rod ends, Roll Design steering stem, Elka shock, got the Fox floats right there, got our spindles, rear hubs, RPM Dominator axle, of course our swing arm, which is a Hauser -1 swing arm, and of course we have our DBC Racing stainless steel bolt kit. That's going to make this assembly a breeze, because I'm not going to have to go searching for all these bolts and stuff, and I didn't have to refinish all my bolts and whatnot like I did on the Banshee, so that's going to save me a lot of time, and it's going to look really trick. All right guys, now the first thing I want to do is get all of our A-arms, our swing arm, all of our bushings and everything set. So these, we'll do the Roll Design stuff first, all of our front A-arms. If anybody has not been following the build, these are +3 MX A-arms. Roll Design is pretty much top of the line when it comes to A-arms, so I'm super excited to run these things. Now they come with a Ziploc bag filled with all of our pins and our bushings and whatnot. So I'm gonna pop this thing open, and you can see we got some plastic washers in there. So let me set these things up. I wanna put some grease in all of these, of course. Gotta make sure everything's nice and greased. Okay, so these uprights, or the pins, whatever you wanna call them, these we can put on after they're on the quad. So I'm not gonna open these up just yet because they're labeled lower and upper. I just don't wanna get them mixed up right now. This is the first time I'm doing a Roll Design front end, so I'm not exactly familiar with everything. So I wanna try to keep everything as organized as possible. All right, so here are the pivot pins. So this is pretty easy. I mean, these literally just, we'll grease these and then they slide in. I'm not gonna push it in right now because it is a little bit snug. And then I believe you just take a plastic washer and go on each side like that. I mean, really there's no prep that needs to be done here. I didn't really know if they were gonna be, you know, sometimes they have pins that are split down the middle and they're flared out at the edges. I wasn't sure how the setup was gonna be. So this will be easy enough. I'm just gonna throw some greases on these, pop them in, and kind of place these to the side, and then we'll do the swing arm. I'm also gonna take a little bit of extra grease and try to kind of fill the groove in here. There's no grease zerks on these. I guess I could add those in if I really wanted to. So for now, I just want to make sure that there's some grease inside so that we get the most life out of these bushings. Looks like I'll have to press them the rest of the way in with the vise. They go pretty easy, just not easy enough for your hands. You can see there's a little bit of a lip sticking out there, so there is a small overhang. I'll have to tap that through just a little bit to make it even. So the swing arm is going to be pretty easy. You can see this finish on here, man. This is going to look great. We're not actually using bearings like they use from the OEM setup. We're going to be using these little Delrin plastic bushings. These are more simple. You don't have to use the cups on the end or anything. So it's less pieces, and these are supposed to be an upgrade. They were 50 bucks for all four. I'll put a link in the description below where you can get these. So this is a pretty easy setup. We're gonna put the carrier in once everything is on the quad. I think that'll be a little bit easier. It'll be a little bit lighter and easier to work with. The linkage is all ready to go. I already rebuilt this. If you guys haven't been following, I do have a video where I show rebuilding this linkage and freshening it up to get it to basically look new like where it's at now. And I was able to get a new old stock bushing kit for this, a rebuild kit from Pivot Works. So this is completely rebuilt. So I'm gonna press these in with the vise just like I did the pins on the front A-arms, and then we'll put a little bit of grease on the inside, and literally the swing arm bolt just goes right through. Pretty easy. Dude, these things are so cool. I still can't get over these. Just a work of art. So the rear Elka shock is ready to go, but we do have some bushings to put in place on the Fox shocks. And I also want to put these guards on, and then we can put them in place. All right, check this out. There's even a congratulations message. Thank you for choosing Fox Float 3 Evil RC2 shock absorbers for your ATV. In doing so, we believe you have chosen the finest suspension products in the world. Dude, I feel like I'm about to embark on a journey. This is freaking crazy. I did notice they come with like everything here. This is a somewhat universal kit. Depending on what model you're going on, you're going to be picking different, these are all different widths. Not all different widths, but there's different sets here so that this can fit multiple ATVs. You can see it right here. It tells you exactly which O-rings to use and which spacers. And you can see right here, Honda TRX. That's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to get those ones picked out, and then we're going to throw a little bit of blue Loctite on these tiny little screws. That is what it recommends in the Fox manual, and we'll put on those guards. Now the manual does say to torque these 7 inch-pounds. That is really barely any torque at all. I'm not going to torque these. I'm just going to snug them with a little Allen wrench. And just one last thing I want to do. It doesn't say to do this in the Fox instructions, but I like to just put a very thin film of grease on my spacers. Anytime you have moving components, I just think it's good to have a little bit of grease. All right, so let's slide this lower A-arm in place. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a snug fit, which is what we want. Now this stainless steel bolt kit comes with nylocks, so it's not going to be necessary to use any kind of Loctite or anything. Nylocks are pretty reliable with never coming off. For now, I just want to run all the bolts in place. Now right here, I'm torquing all of my A-arm bolts to 40 foot-pounds, and I'm gonna hold off on the shock bolts. I wanna have the weight of the machine on them before I tighten them down. That's looking pretty freaking sweet. So I was comfortable torquing these down to 40 foot-pounds because there is like no, these are so snug, all these fittings. A lot of times with suspension and components, you're supposed to wait until the weight of the quad is on them because it can, you know, the way that the bolt sits can move up or down, but they're so snug, I don't think there's going to be any up or down movement. So I tighten those up so that we'll be able to put our bumper on, because the bumper is going to block access to holding onto these Allen heads. But before I do that, I forgot I have to put my steering stem bearing in. So I have the bearing in the freezer. I'm going to use a C-clamp. We should be able to push it right into place and put our 2 seals in there. I just want to get that done now before we put the bumper in there, because that's going to make it a little bit more cumbersome to get to. And then there's a snap ring that goes in here. Seal on top. And then there's a seal that goes in the bottom too. right, now let's get this bumper on. I'm using a little bit of blue Loctite, and then we're going to tighten these down to 30 foot-pounds, I believe. No, 26 foot-pounds. Well, that looks freaking cool. Even just these few pieces in the front with that contrast, it's just looking awesome. Definitely getting excited here. You may notice some of these roll design stickers are peeling up, so I might take a heat gun to it and fix it, or I may peel those off. I'm undecided on that just yet. Quick side note, guys, I ended up using a heat gun to peel those graphics off and very carefully trimmed away as much of that glossy background as I possibly could, and then I reapplied them and it looks way better. So we do have to do the spindles and whatnot, but I'm going to come around to the back and throw the swing arm linkage and the rear Elka shock on, just so that we can get some weight on the back, because this thing's been tipping on the stand as it is, and it's going to be pretty neat to see the front end and back end all on this machine.
5 hours later.
All right, I just took like a freaking 4-hour detour to make this. Let me show you what happened. So I was getting everything ready to put the swing arm together, and you'll notice, you see this one hole here? It's like extra big for the linkage. So, I mean, you know, that's not really gonna work. And if I put a washer over here, just so that it would be like that, there'd still be a lot of motion in here. And you know, this is the rear shock linkage. This is going to be taking a lot of impact. The last thing, and we're going to be taking this to the motocross track. Last thing we want is to have an unreliable rear end like that, and that'll probably elongate this hole over here and just ruin the thing. So what I figured out is that my TRX is a 1987. So from 1986 to 1987, they had a different bolt that goes back here, where it was both this narrow style on both sides. Now this is an aftermarket Hauser swing arm, and they utilize the 88-89 rear bolt, which has a bigger shaft up here, I guess. I couldn't even find a picture of one online. It's a discontinued part number. I was just going to buy the bolt, but you can't even do that. So I went downstairs on the lathe, and I machined this spacer out of aluminum, and it's going to be perfect. Fits in there perfectly. And then I had to cut down one of these stainless steel bolts from the DBC Racing kit to make it fit right. And this fits in there perfectly, comes through the other side, and that looks really nice. It's going to match all the rest of the stainless steel bolts, and now we don't have to worry about trying to find that discontinued bolt for the 88 to 89. Yeah, so it took like 4 hours to make that piece, because I went downstairs to machine it, and it turned out the lathe needed to be calibrated, and it was this whole big thing. So piece is made. Let's get back to it. Let's get that swing arm on there. All right, so I'm going to try to do this so that you guys can see. The first thing we're going to do is put our linkage on. So this grease zerk is supposed to face down according to the service manual. Now all of these grease fittings and everything have been greased up, and I'm going to be putting all of my bolts in from the left side to the right just to make them all match. And I am going to be putting a little bit of blue Loctite on these, because these are not nylocks. All right, now I'm going to bring my swing arm in, and for the 86-87, the motor mount goes back here, and we actually can put the swing arm bolt together without actually, you know, the swing arm bolt doesn't go through the motor. So on this motor mount, there is, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but it does say up on one half, so it's kind of hard to mix it up. I mean, you could put it this way, I guess, but it goes this way, kind of like a crescent moon facing forward. So that's going to go there, and we will just slide the swing arm in place, and it shouldn't be too hard. Just like the linkage bolts, I'm going to come in from this side. I'm not too worried about greasing these up, because I have a special swing arm bolt that actually has a grease zerk in it. So I'll be able to grease this thing up once everything's together. And for now, I'm just going to spin on our swing arm nut, because I don't want to tighten that up until we have the motor in there, because we'll want to adjust our motor mount. All right, now I'm going to slide my shock in place with the reservoir facing towards the back. Now there's this special bolt with a grease zerk in it from the factory. This is one bolt that is not in the stainless steel bolt kit, so you do have to use your OEM one. I've cleaned mine up and coated the head with black. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this through. I'm just gonna get it started on the one side. And then our linkage goes this way with the grease zerk facing to the front and facing downward, and then this one in the back. Now I've got to compress the rear shock a little bit in order to get this rear swing arm bolt to line up. So I'm going to use a strap, and we should be able to compress the suspension a little bit. That should be good. Now we'll put our spacer in, our bolt. All right, now I'm going to torque all my linkage bolts to 55 foot-pounds, and then my upper shock mount is going to be 40 foot-pounds. Now, typically, like I said before, you really should do this when the bike is sitting on the ground. However, all of my bushings and everything are so snug that I don't think it's going to make a difference. Slide our carrier in. Don't worry, guys, I already greased this up. Man, that looks nice. I did have to sand down this pin just a little bit, and I wanted it to be just slightly snug. Make sure that's seated all the way in that groove. All right, now these will be getting Loctite, but for right now, I'm just gonna set these in place until, you know, everything is set up and we adjust our chain. And I'm also gonna take a little bit of grease and just line the inside of our oil seal lips. Put this Trick Fireball Racing anti-fade on. We'll snug that up later, but man, does that make it easy. All right, let's slide our Roll Design steering stem in place. I did put some grease on the inner lip of the seals at the bottom, and also just a thin film on the steering stem itself. Now on the underside, we have a small collar that fits into our grease seal. And we take our nut, spin it on, and this gets tightened to 50 foot-pounds. We'll throw a new cotter pin in. And then there's a little plastic cover that goes over this. It snaps in place. It can only go one way. There's like a little notch in it. There we go. All right, now we're gonna put our collar brace on up here. I'm gonna take a little bit of grease. This is a new bushing that I'm gonna be putting on here. I'm just gonna put a tiny film of grease on there, keep things lubricated, and put this in place. Now we're gonna put this fresh billet clamp on here that NPM Racing hooked us up with. And I am using a small amount of blue Loctite on these. If you guys do decide to pick one of these up from NPM Racing, they do come with mounting hardware. I'm going to tighten these down to 22 foot-pounds. All right, let's see if we can get these spindles figured out. Like I said, I've never set up a set of A-arms with this style before. I think it's pretty straightforward though. It's almost like a shock mount. It looks like you have these spacers in here that kind of fit into place, and then you tighten this down and this will be rock solid. I'm also going to put these tie rods in place, and I like to put the little adjustment portion towards the outside. And I am using blue Loctite on these, in case you guys are wondering, and these are stainless steel, so that's why they're not painted. Whew, all right, man. I think we got a good start on this thing. Man, it looks sweet. We got a lot of components on here. Oh man, I just want to keep going and getting the wheels on. With those wheels on there, oh man, it's gonna look so good. But everything's coming together really nice. These I'm going to take care of probably once I have the wheels and everything on. I want to make sure everything is set right with those, and then I'll torque those up. The tie rods I already torqued and everything. The front suspension I'm going to torque when it's on the ground. Everything else is pretty much torqued. I'm probably going to end up going over everything on this bike when it's, you know, sitting on the ground with the motor and everything in it, just to make sure everything's tight. Oh man, I'm happy with the way this is turning out though. All right, so I'm gonna call it there today. We got pretty much everything done that we wanted to. I think this is a really, really nice start. I'd love to get it on all fours today, but you know, I gotta get some editing done for you guys so I can get this video out for you. If you're new to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. We do projects like this all the time, and I appreciate that thumbs up button as well. That always helps me out. So stay tuned, guys. We're gonna be moving along with Project 250R. The end's gonna be here before you know it. I can't wait to do a before and after of what this thing looked like when we first got it to what it's gonna look like when it's done, man. It's gonna be so radical. It's not even gonna look like the same quad. I can't wait to rip this thing, man. All the suspension and stuff. Oh, dude, it's gonna be awesome.